ready yet, right?
No, I'm not ready.
Hey, everyone.
We're ready?
Yes.
Hi.
Call to order meeting of the work session for City of Wilsonville City Council on June 20th at 5:21 p.m. We'll start by asking councilors for a review of the agenda and any items on consent. Any comments? Seeing none, are there any councilors' concerns? Okay, we'll begin our council work session, which is reviewing resolution number 2979, the adoption of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee's strategic plan. And we'll be hearing from, I think, Ms. Mombert and some of our committee members and consultants. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I'm Zoe Mumbert. I'm the assistant to the city manager for the city and also the staff liaison to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. This evening, Imran Haider is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Chair. He is with us tonight via Zoom, as well as Bill De La Cruz. He is the consultant that we've been using with our DEI, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion work. As a little bit of background, I know that you're not supposed to read from slides, but I'm going to read from a slide. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background for those that may not have been following our diversity, equity, and inclusion work very closely. This is a committee that was formed in 2020, at the end of 2020, to have a group of individuals come together and start looking at how we can be more inclusive and welcoming as a community as a whole. After that group was formed, their first step, this 13-member committee, their first step was to develop the vision and the mission. And those are the elements that are really guiding the work and the strategic plan for the committee that you'll see this evening. So the vision of the committee is that the committee is a beacon of connectivity, empowered to take thoughtful action to ensure sustained community collaboration to foster a climate of inclusion and belonging for all residents and visitors in Wilsonville. And the mission of the committee is to serve to connect Wilsonville to a diverse perspective and lived experience of its people. We advocate for equitable access and opportunity for every community member. We identify barriers and participation and inclusion, and pursue programs, policies, partnerships, and ideas to remove those barriers. And these are really the overarching elements that are shaping the strategic plan for the committee's work that Imran and Bill are going to talk about this evening. And this evening, we're looking for any feedback. What are we missing? Are you comfortable with this before we actually take it to City Council for approval, which will then guide the committee's work moving forward? And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Bill to talk about the outreach work that was done in order to develop the strategy that's in front of you.
Great. Thank you, Zoe. And good evening, Mayor and members of council. Really honored to be with you, even though it's over Zoom, to share this strategic planning and how far we've come. So we've done a number of things with the outreach. We have a really diverse committee to start with that represents a number of different communities and abilities, disabilities, racial, ethnic, sexual orientation. And so we've been really engaged in conversations as a committee about their experiences and things that would be important in terms of outcomes and looking at possible barriers and also successes. So we're approaching this from asking the questions about not just what are the barriers that you see, also where are we doing really well with our community engagement and bringing in folks who are really diverse. And there's been a lot of conversation with the departments in the city. So we've been talking with folks from Parks and Rec and planning and the library, and really collaborating meeting internally with them, with city manager's office, to talk about what are their challenges in community engagement and who are some of the internal groups that they're aware of that we should touch base with, and also who are some of the external groups, some organizations or committees or other groups within Wilsonville who are also working on these issues. So we focus on existing groups like Wake and other groups who are already doing things in the community. We've been actually talking with the school district as well, and the superintendent, talking about how to collaborate with some of the events that the school district is working with, including Dia de los Muertos and things like that. We ran a number of focus groups where we talked to folks about what are your experiences in Wilsonville, where do you see some barriers, where do you see places where we could be more impactful in engagement, and those were really interesting conversations because it was, again, a diverse group in the community, and regardless of folks' identity, there were a lot of real positives that came out of that, and so some of it was to build on it, and some of it is to really think about next steps. A couple of things that came up through the focus groups was people talking about kind of the invisible homelessness in Wilsonville and how do we have those conversations and think about what to do there. There was some engagement issues around, are we getting people who just work in Wilsonville but may not live there, or renters who may be subject to some of the things that are happening with housing and things like that, but may not always be a part of the conversation. So it was really interesting getting to know both people who are really engaged and people who want to be more engaged. There was some conversation around interpretation services for Spanish speakers and how do we reach out to those folks, because some people are affiliated with a group and some people are on their own. And then we also ran an anonymous just community survey through SurveyMonkey. And I know you have access to all of that, but it was a really great process because it allowed people who wanted to be really visual to be part of the focus groups, and it also allowed people who didn't want to be as didn't want to have their name used or wanted to remain more anonymous. We still were able to get some really good information. And it was just a snapshot. When you're talking about statistically significant data, it was probably such a small n size that I wouldn't say it was reflective of everyone in Wilsonville. I would say that it was reflective of the diversity of folks that are in the city, and I think that it was a really great beginning place to just kind of hear from people about what they think would be really important to them, some of the conversations that we can continue to have. So I think I have one more slide. So these were the areas, and I will start by saying if you want to think about a framework that the committee has kind of wrapped this all around, and I would ask you to think about it through the lens of belonging and inclusion. So belonging is the idea that I can be a part of the community, part of these organizations, part of a group, and bring my most authentic self, however I define that. And then inclusion is just looking at policies, practices, protocols. So that's where we start to look at what are some of the conversations that we need to be having internally to talk about things like community engagement, to talk about cultural events. So as big as this could be, we were able to land on these three areas: community engagement, communications, and education. And education could be just speaking events or events where people are invited in to learn something new. And then more inclusive culture events, celebrations, and holiday recognitions. And these three rose to the top through the community engagement work that we did and also through the conversations that we had as a committee. So I'm really excited that that these are things that the committee felt like they could have an immediate impact on in some of the areas that are really interesting to them. So I'll let Imran take a little bit from there.
All right. Yeah, so everything that Bill said, I echo that. And I guess we want our 13 people plus Bill's leadership to, the best way I can put this is create pathways for communication to be had or people to tell their story. And I think a lot of times people defer to academic studies and things like that, which I do too, because that's part of my profession. But I think there's a definite nuance and powerful strength to having stories that have from lived experience. And I think that's what we bring as far as a voice for underrepresented communities, historically marginalized communities. And then hopefully that allows, say, 3, 5, 10, whatever, 12, 15, 20% of Wilsonville residents that relate to the people on our committee and whatever we're trying to do to create, so a stronger connection with our community. So that's sort of I'd say the layer foundation for what the DEI work is doing. And then the bullets on the screen are just kind of giving you a snapshot of we had narrowed down what we wanted to do as far as tactics. Obviously, you may have some questions about these with specifics. I may or may not have answers, but I can tell you that I think some people have suggested possibly holding community conversations at a local restaurant so we can partner with that restaurant to, gather people there to give that restaurant business and then have sort of a education piece about a celebration of some type or religious holiday that's happening or experience that somebody's had, and somebody gives their, like I just said, their shared experience, lived experience of being Black in a predominantly white neighborhood or having a religious celebration that was never recognized growing up and how that made them feel. And so that might be an example of like a lecture series / multicultural event that's going on at different areas in the Wilsonville community. And there's all these things are a work in progress, and we definitely haven't landed on one thing or another specifically. Obviously, some of you, I think all of you attended the Juneteenth event, which thank you for coming to that. It's awesome to have support from everybody who's in the room right now, but that's an example of an event that's not been typically a part of Wilsonville's history. So it's an example of what DEI work can do. And I think it's a great example of what DEI work can do. And the business collaboration, just to go back last things though, and then you can switch the slide, is Dar es Salaam, for example, provided the food for that event, which was excellent, and Dar es Salaam's a minority-owned business in Wilsonville and it was surprising to me that many people said I've never been there and I didn't know where it was or anything about it. So I think that's a really great example of collaboration with a business, a minority-owned business, to try to give them some traction and then use them at an event that we're doing that may or may not pertain to whatever that topic is that we're discussing that day. All right, we can switch the slide now. So this slide basically just highlights, we're wanting to do things like share data. Bill just talked about it. We want to gather and share data, which I think is powerful to the community, and that can be with the Boone's Ferry Messenger, that can be with surveys, that can be with people clicking on a link, giving information or feedback about where they came from, where they are now, what they feel is happening, what could be better, or how they've been treated, and then give that information back to the community and say, this is what is happening or what has happened, and this is why we're motivated to do X, Y, or Z. So that's just an example there, and including students is just something that gets overlooked with a lot of these high-level, whether it's city, state, federal. It's just students are such a great part of our population, and they have a pulse for things on the ground that I have no clue how, language being used, social media platforms. And so when we include students, we're not only including a large group of people that are pieces of clay being molded it's important. I know I went through that as a student growing up, and it would have done a lot for me in my development if somebody said, hey, you don't look like everyone else, but that's okay. you're awesome, we accept you. So I think there's a lot of different layers to including students. That's really important. They can teach us a lot. So yeah, if you just read through the screen there, there's going to be, I would say, a person, we try, Bill and I talked about this the other day. We try to, if we feel like one person can sleep better tonight, knowing that they were heard, or knowing that they're being represented better or highlighted, that's a win. And part of that is, the other day, I saw a lot of posts for the Juneteenth event, and I think that there might have been somebody in our Wilsonville community that felt a little bit more engaged and connected to Wilsonville that day. I also think that, or I know that the Boones Ferry Messenger did a different logo for the June edition, and I know that that received really good feedback as a highlight to some members. And one person, she called me and she said, my son or daughter, I can't remember, was so ecstatic about that design that they put that on their wall in their room. And it was just one of those things that they saw, you know, it on a social media platform, and then when it physically came in the mail, they were like, my goodness, can't believe this, and put it on their wall. And so that's a great way, I think, to create, you know, connected, community organized approach or a strategy that's going to allow people from underrepresented communities to feel like they matter a little bit more that day. So that goes back to what I just said, the one person at a time feeling more included or sleeping better that night is a win for the DEI committee. Yeah, so this one I think I've talked to everyone about in the room before, and so I apologize if I sound redundant. And by the way, though, it's okay to read slides. It's just my thing. We all have our own things that we do in life. But so I'm not going to read you all the bullets, but the one I want to pertain to is visual representation. I think that the example that I can paint for you, the picture I can paint for you, is you have a circle of 10 friends. And I know back in my earlier days, I had that big circle of 10 friends that were like, oh, we're all hang out, everybody's in the loop, we all do events together. And now my circle's shrunk, right? Obviously, but that 10 friends, if we can think back to having that circle, say 9 of them celebrate, you know, Thanksgiving or Easter or some major holiday, and the one person doesn't, they celebrate Festivus. I don't know if you're going to get my reference there, but if they celebrate Festivus and the 9 other people don't, well, what's happened a lot of times in my experience is I would always attend the Christmas party. I would also attend the Easter event. I would also attend the very sort of dominant Western holiday celebration or see visual representation around. But it's different. I don't know how long that circle of friends would last if the one friend never got anybody to attend their dinner, their celebration, right? So those 9 people, I feel like having some idea of what it looks like for that Festivus celebration or that dinner, it's going to make that one person feel included, right? It's only the one person, but still it matters to keeping that circle together and respect each other and what everybody's beliefs are. And so I think that goes back to how important it is. In the United States, our culture is very driven by tangible, visual elements of anything we do. And whether that's material things, decoration, we're very big on that with just how events are recognized and how important they are. So I think that that's just one thing that comes back to me when we look at trying to understand more days on the calendar out of 365 that might be, you know, a Chinese New Year in February or something like that, that historically wasn't recognized. And say we only out of 20, you're going to correct me on this probably, but 26,000 people in Wilsonville, if that's what the number is, say there's 2,000 people that feel like they're majority ethnicity Chinese. Maybe they see that as being a big deal and a huge win if there was some sort of city effort to recognize the Chinese New Year, right? So that's kind of where we get into. Obviously, it's not the majority, and we're definitely not trying to push our agenda on anyone. We don't want everyone to stop what they're doing and celebrate the Chinese New Year. But I think it's cool if somebody drives past the visual representation and says, oh, wow, I didn't even know that there was a different New Year for this part of this culture or this demographic or this people that, you know, I'm neighbors with. So I think that's where we get into educating, communication, presenting them with something. If they want to abstain, fine, we get it. But it's there because we feel like it's the right thing to do. Again, being that there's been groups that have never had representation in this country's history. Is that it, though? Did I make it in one piece?
Great job. So with that, thank you, Imran and Bill, for the wonderful presentation. The council will get an opportunity to ask questions of them as well. So our next steps after this evening, we just want to make sure we're on the right track. All of that information, obviously the committee can't do it all at once. So once we have council approval, hopefully in July, the committee will start meeting at their August meeting to prioritize these tactics. They are doing some of this work already with putting information in the Boonesbury Messenger, starting to think of different visual representation items or events that they can do in the future. But these tactics are linked back to their vision and mission and will guide their work moving forward. It'll also help with as what I've learned over the past years, we start going and then all these ideas start flourishing and you can't do everything at once. So this will help guide our work so that we don't get stuck on all these different tangents, so we can stay on task to complete the work that the committee is asked to do. So with that, I will open it up for any questions that the council might have of Imran and Bill.
Council President Ockerville.
Thank you. And thank you for walking through some of the work and some of what's been going on with the committee in the last several months. I really appreciate what you've put together and what's included in this strategic plan. One of the points that's bulleted in the plan and that was spoken to this evening was the involvement of students and the great contributions that they make. I was able to actually sit next to one of the student members of the DEI committee at the council board retreat, committee retreat a couple weeks ago, and was just so impressed with Cameron's her eloquency and everything. It was really wonderful to get to chat a little and learn about plans for after post-graduation. And so it occurs to me that we need to continually be reaching out and recruiting new student members. And I'm wondering what we're doing on that front, and just also maybe learning from their experience serving on the committee. Are we thinking about doing things like an exit interview or something like that? Is there things that we can do to make the experience and the engagement even more welcoming and productive for those students too? I just kind of been kicking around some of those questions and thoughts and wondered what your ideas on all of that is, because I agree that that's an incredibly important facet to have those students involved in these conversations and get to learn from them as well.
I think I'll start on that one as it relates to the recruitment of our boards and commission. We do have 2 committee members that are students, and they are slated to stay in their seats until December, which is consistent with the staggered terms that we have. There'll be 1-year cycles that can be reappointed. As you mentioned, Cameron did graduate, and she has been a phenomenal asset to our committee, and she's the one that actually put us in contact with the Wilsonville Black Student Union. And so our hope is to go through Cameron, go through the Black Student Union, and also MECHA to start to reach students. So come January, when we have a reappointment, that we have a few excellent candidates for the mayor to evaluate, hopefully at least one junior, so they can get their feet wet and stay involved and help coach the next one. But yes, when it comes to engaging the youth, we do want to be partnering. Bill mentioned Dia de los Muertos, and that is something that we do as a committee want to partner with the school district on. How do we make this not just a school district, but community event? I'm getting a little off track here, but one of the things we want to do is look at partnerships. As a committee of 13 and one staff person, we can't do everything. So how do we partner with other community groups to engage in events? So that's one of the elements as well. Bill and Imran?
Yeah, if I could, first, just love your comments, and we would appreciate any ideas that you all have on the council as well in terms of ways to engage the student community. I've worked with a couple other municipalities, and one of the things that we haven't talked to the school district about, but this will be new to Imran and Zoe, but I've worked with high schools that actually gave students credit for being a part of a committee like this for like volunteering or some of their civil government types of approaches. So that's a conversation that we can have with the school district, actually see if students could get some type of a credit for being a part of this, because it's a lot of time, and Cameron, we're both sad and really excited that she's graduated, because she has been such a gem, and she would just stop us all right in the middle of the conversation and say, well, wait a minute, here's the student perspective, and we'd all just be quiet and listen. So I think there's a number of strategies, including what Zoe shared, and then really leveraging our relationship with the school district as well to tap into the high school students, as well as the other committees that are within the schools.
Thank you. I did have a comment, hearing you talk about the stories and, people's lived experiences being so powerful as a way to learn from them. And I would like to suggest that in the Boones Ferry Messenger, we try to have stories that, one person's view on life and their experiences, rather than statistics and definitions, because I think it sticks with us and it kind of illuminates things a little more if you can hear. It doesn't have to be everything, but one obstacle that was overcome. And with so much tough news in the world, I would love to see stories that are showing stories of overcoming obstacles and discovering ways to break into new areas. So I see Councillor Lehan has a comment.
Well, Imran, could you share for a minute your experience in writing an article, and Erica? So we're starting to do that a little bit, Mayor, with some of the committee members sharing their stories, but maybe Imran, because he wrote one, got some good feedback also.
It did get some good feedback. I think moving forward, my experience was just, again, I wanted to share what it's like to go through a fasting month, and because it's been something that every job I've ever had, from every supervisor or manager, I never openly just chatted with them about it. It's not like it affected necessarily my work product, but it was a part of my, of who I am. And so I guess I probably should have been shared on some level, but with that said, we have a tentative plan with Bill Evans to, share about we'll have a follow-up to Juneteenth column, and then we'll have a ADA access or lack of access column by one of our members who's wheelchair bound. And I think that those are valuable pieces of information that, again, come from lived experience that are going to go into, I think, 10,000 plus households. Well, I know it wasn't like 14,000 households, but 10,000 plus, the last they checked, are reading that. It's a lot of people that can get information on a very unique level. Mm-hmm. So random people reaching out to me or giving me feedback through Bill Evans was
great.
Awesome. Like, I just don't even know how to articulate what that feels like when somebody's like, I really appreciate you telling me that I'm in my whatever amount, what part of life they are, and I didn't know about this fasting month or anything about it until you shared your column. So with that said, I think it would be super ultra valuable to have a high school student at Wilsonville High School do a column on what they've experienced and what could be improved there. And and what is discussed and what is understood, or how things are learned and how people are treated. And I would love to know, because it's been so long since I walked in the high school hallway. I would be very curious to know what is going on, and then how can us, with you, the council and the mayor, do something to make our high school culture a little bit more productive. I don't know. It'd be great to hear that, though.
I appreciate that. Councilor Lehan.
Yes, I likewise have been very. Wait a second. I likewise have been very impressed with the work that you've done, and the ways that you've identified how to share various cultures and cultural celebrations. I think we have a lot more opportunities to do that. I have a couple of questions that I didn't see on there. As a council, as a city, to what degree do we talked about partnering with the school district, but to what degree do we look at or filter the work that we do with other groups, especially groups that we provide funding to, as to whether or not they are also, I don't want to say meeting these standards, but are sensitive to some degree to these things. Groups like Community Sharing or Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area Coalition, which is right now internally going through a lot of distress on the DEI issue. Mm-hmm. And those are both organizations that we provide funding to, that we're involved in their mission. So, and then there's other groups that we're involved with but are not providing funding. Do we apply any filter or have any expectations for other groups that they behave similarly? That's one question. I don't know if you want to, either you want to respond to that, but then I have a second one.
So could I respond to that before you go to the next one, so it's not too much information? Sure. So when I served on the Human Relations Commission here in Boulder County, one of the things that we asked everyone that we were giving money to is, what's the diversity of your board? Do you have an equity statement? Do you have a DEI policy? And do you do development and training work internally with your staff and the people that you serve? And so this is a great example of how, from that inclusion perspective, where we're looking at policies, practices, and protocols, that we could, in collaboration with you and with however the funding is set up, to create a series of questions that would at least let people know that the city of Wilsonville feels like this is a very important lens to start to look through in terms of what people are doing in this area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I would say absolutely that is a possibility, and it would just be framing what are those questions that you all think would be important to just kind of gauge where people are. So we wouldn't want to use it as a hammer. We would want to use it as a way to just say, this is of value to us, and if you haven't started this process, this would probably be a good time to do that.
And just to add, Bill, real quick, I think I would turn it back to you, all you counselors and Mayor Fitzgerald, like, how important is it to the city, and how much bandwidth does it take from all of you to, what kind of practices do we have in place for hiring city positions and or appointing board members? Like, I know my wife's company, her former company, they would do all video off Zoom calls for all of their interviews for all of their executives down to the first level of their company. And that was their way of trying to get an equal playing field for if they're white, if they're not white, if they're, whatever they are, we can't see what they look like. And it was one piece. I get it. It's one piece. It's one example. But I think that's where to me, I can sleep at night no matter what the outcome is if we did our best. And so if we're doing the right things to diversify our committees, or if we want to put people of color in positions to help make decisions around here, if we've tried, then that's all we can ask for. We can't confirm, we can't 100% with certainty say we're going to get people of color on boards and committees in Wilsonville, because there's there's obviously not, that's not the majority population, right? So I think if we make an effort and we're doing the right things to find people to fill positions, I can live with the results. I don't know if that's the answer you want to hear, but I think if it just goes back to how important is it and what type of evaluative practices do we have in place to get people in those positions. And we should just follow those, and hopefully the results will develop from there.
I was just going to add something to that.
We're definitely not here to force go ahead.
Oh, I know Councilor Lehan has another question, but I think it would be good to have something, an aspiration in writing, because I know from experience in other organizations that it is very easy to continue in a pathway of recruiting people who look like the people who were there 5 years ago. And it just keeps going in that same way unless you take a purposeful approach to at least be open and I think strive, be more than open. But we want qualified people who are going to apply themselves and be engaged and represent our community. Councilor Lehan, you had another point.
Yeah, okay, my other issue here is, since I'm sort of the amateur historian of the group, is I didn't hear anything about the historical piece, but we definitely have work to do in that arena. It is not in our story and should be. We give all the credit to the Boones for Boone's Ferry, and a big chunk of it has to go to the Kalapuya, who were here running a ferry or some sort of crossing there for hundreds of years before that. We have no indication here of the huge role the Chinese labor was in this community, because they've completely disappeared. I have 5 Japanese babies in unmarked graves, and no other Japanese indication that they were in the community. These are missing pieces, and I feel like maybe some of them are things that students could help us, move forward in getting that out there, or correcting what is currently wrong in our historical record, either wrong or missing. And then I just want to bring this up because this is the white side of this. This is a German town. It was founded by Germans and mostly Germans, but after the Second World War, people didn't want to admit to it. So we have marketed ourselves as French with Charbonneau and Villebois, because that was more marketable than German. But Wilson was absolutely German, as were the rest of our roads: Beckman, Elligson, Toffman, Kohlemeyer. What do you think? Those are all German. And we have denied and I know at the time we did Villebois, some of the people complained at that time, who had German ancestors, are we trying to erase our German heritage and replace it with French, which is more marketable? And I have to say, well, yes, I think so. But somehow we have to kind of embrace that we have a huge German background. We only a year ago had our first Oktoberfest, because people didn't want to sort of fess up to being German. So so anyway, that's another sort of cultural discrimination that we've kind of tried to overwrite with something else.
And by talking about it, it would open up other things that we know it can benefit from learning about.
Yeah,
I just
not that I think the Germans were great, but neither were the French.
Now, given that it's 6 o'clock, I just wanted to do a time check, and we have 1 hour of material between now and 7 o'clock. How should we proceed to give you the best feedback and give you what you need for today? And are there people I didn't hear from? Councilor Linville.
Well, I just have one comment and a question, I guess, and that is that I think the work that you've done, and I think parsing it down to the number of objectives that you did was really wise, very, very wise, because it's a lot easier to manage and to develop those strategies. And then in the staff report, it says that there are strategic actions for each objective which the DEI committee will prioritize after the adoption of the strategic plan. And I just wanted to say, I look forward to those. I mean, I'm excited that those will be coming, and so I think it's a very workable strategic plan. Doesn't, it's not too grandiose. I appreciate Councillor Lehan's additions, and there are probably others that will arise as you move forward and do an update on the strategic plan. So I think great work for this point. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor West.
Thanks. And could I just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead and respond. Go ahead, Bill.
No, it's okay, I'll wait.
Okay. Go ahead, Ben.
Bill, I want to thank you for taking over an hour this last week to sit down with me and have a deeper conversation about some thoughts that I had. And so I found that conversation to be very profitable and robust. And thank you for giving me the space to be able to share those concerns that I had. I like that your framework, the philosophy informing the actions that you guys are taking are rooted in this concept of inclusion and belonging specifically, and that you've stressed the fact that, in my opinion, what I'm hearing is some of those core principles is that you want to treat people like individuals, like human beings, not like some type of abstraction or political abstraction. Your goal is to uplift and to empower people, and have looked to bring in so many different diversity of thoughts, opinions, ideas, backgrounds to bring that sense of belonging. I can see that as we kind of go over this further. And then I know Imran personally, and Bill, it was great to get to know you even over this whole period, but that everything, I encourage us, everything that we do with this is rooted in love and compassion, right? Depending on, doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter your political beliefs, it doesn't matter your specific worldview, it doesn't matter all these different things that often we get separated over and put into these different boxes and isolated from one another, but that's not belonging, that's isolation, right? And so I see the framework here trying to be one that really informs through compassion and love. And so maybe governmental agencies aren't always about love and compassion or always promoting that, but at Wilsonville, we're going to try to do that. So I appreciate that. I do have one thing. I think that because DEI in our culture right now can be a hot topic. It can get into the fire zone really quickly with people, and then we're not listening to each other. And definitions, as we talked, Bill, can change so radically from one worldview informing the work versus another worldview informing the work, that some frame of reference to know what we're actually talking about when we use certain words and just having basic definitions allows people to make sure they're on the same page and not talking through, past, or around one another, and that we're on the same topic addressing the same issue. So, Bill, I think we talked about this also when we had a private meeting about the benefit of maybe having something like that, but I think that would benefit, because some of my questions come around like, what definitions are we using, Bill, and what is informing this? And so once we got to talk about that, I was like, okay, cool, we're on the same page on the vast majority of this. So I don't know what you guys think about that. Maybe you can speak to if you think that would be a benefit, but once again, thank you for your guys' work, and I think we're doing a good job as a city, so.
Thank you. Bill, before you respond, I'll just respond as quickly as possible because I know we're short on time. I just with Councilor Lehan's comments and question, I think I would defer back to the council and the mayor and say, what we would love to hear your thoughts on what is the best way to remember history. What is the best way to create a representation and acknowledgement of of a Native American tribe that had a lot to do with the existence of Wilsonville. What is the best way to represent the German history? And I agree with what Ben's saying to transition over. It's people are going to, no matter what, we cannot ever satisfy. And at a meeting 2 meetings ago, one of my members said, how are we going to deal with the response? And I was like, I can't, that's just something I will never acknowledge because I can't. It's out of our control. Like, if I thought about what everybody was going to think after I give them a response, I don't know if I'd ever get a wink of sleep, right? And so I don't know that we can massage or create satisfaction for every single person. But I think that I would love your feedback on what representation matters, how we can name a school or a park or rename something after people that matter that were here in the beginning. I think that's awesome. And then with what Ben is saying, I have actually had this conversation, Ben, about sort of rebranding DEI and calling it something different because it is like everything gets placed in a category and it gets shot out of a barrel, and it's like people already are tuning you out when you say, oh, I'm by the way, I represent the DEI committee from Wilsonville. They're like, I don't like this guy, right? So I think there's a way that we can try to have conversations to educate people on what we are really trying to do here. And part of it is just that, saying what DEI really is not what it's made out to be in something that you've seen on television or in any given situation. So anyway, that's my response and our attempt to respond with both of you. And Bill, I'll hand it over to you if we have a minute.
Okay, I would just first start off and say, Councilor Lehan, I do not consider you an amateur historian at all.
None of us do.
Because I've talked to you, and you have a depth of knowledge that is way beyond amateur. So that's my first comment. My second is to just say a deep appreciation for Mayor and City Council, because without your support, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And to Ben's point, we're in a pretty calamitous time with this work, and you have continued to support the committee, continued to support this message, and that really means a lot, I know, to everyone on the committee. And I would say feedback that you have, funnel it to Zoe, and even though the committee won't be meeting, Zoe and I will continue to talk with Imran, and we will figure out how to incorporate whatever feedback you give us between now and the time that you actually vote on it, so that way everything gets captured. And I'm done because I know you have an agenda to follow us.
Thank you. Councilor Linville, did you?
I had a quick
Oh, sorry, wrong label.
That's okay. Sorry, I have a quick question. I know we maybe have talked about this in the past, I mean, this is to the council and to Emron and to Bill. Remind me, is there a liaison yet to this committee, or have we talked about, or is that something you think would benefit?
And I do want to remind us that we're really short on time. We are not having a liaison to this committee.
Okay.
We discussed that.
Okay, just wanted to.
It doesn't lend itself that well to
Okay,
that.
perfect.
So I look forward to hearing more from the committee next, and I think if there's a recommendation from the committee after they discuss rebranding it, that we would like to, this would be the place to discuss it.
So
So thank you.
Mayor, it sounds like
Thank you.
you're all comfortable. There's a few minor things that we will either incorporate or note in the staff report to make sure it's all captured and then bring it back to you in July.
The only thing I would say, I don't think it's minor to add some of the points that Councilor Lehan brought up,
About the historical elements.
and those would be significant bullet points.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So that brings us to also, Ms. Mombert isn't going far because we're talking about the board council retreat recap.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Zoe Mombert, Assistant to the City Manager. Sarah Singer-Wilson is joining us, I believe, via Zoom. She will be on audio. She will not be on video. I am going to share a copy of of her presentation for you this evening. and she's going to provide a brief recap of our boards and commission workshop that was held just a few months ago. Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm really pleased to be able to come back and just kind of wrap up this portion of our work regarding the boards and commissions workshop. And so, if you can recall, last month, I just wanted to circle back and talk about some of the recommendations that came out of the workshop from May. So we designed that workshop with three major outcomes in mind: developing a clear understanding of the council vision and goals, getting clear on the roles of the boards and commissions and supporting that vision, and then getting to know the boards and commissions to help build those connections and foster further collaboration and momentum. So that's how we designed the workshop, and I think everybody had a really great time coming together to get to know one another better. There were great conversations throughout the day, and it was very productive in identifying a few things that we can keep working on to, again, further that collaboration in advancing the vision and goals. So the next slide just highlights, we did share what the 2021 City Council goals were, and just getting connected with that vision, making sure all the boards and commissions understood, the members understood what that was, what it meant, a little bit of context around the council's discussion there. And in addition to that, the boards and commissions had a lot of an opportunity to brainstorm and some great ideas to think about for when the council comes together again next winter, spring to update those goals. So we captured lots of ideas, and those are all detailed in the summary report. And then last, we came up with, through some discussion about how we can improve the volunteer experience and how we can, again, continue to build those relationships and the collaboration with the boards and commissions. Talked about, we've identified some recommendations that you guys can take forward, and as far as like the next steps. So one of those is increasing that ongoing interaction between council and the boards and commissions, providing some communication regarding how those recommendations and findings by the boards and commissions are being used by the council in your decision making. Also providing some opportunities for regular scheduled communication and information sharing among the boards and commissions to facilitate more collaboration. They felt that there was a lot of value in coming together for the workshop, so there's a hope to do that annually, as well as to have some social events to provide some volunteer recognition. And then in addition to that recognition, also highlighting your volunteers through like the stories in the Boone's Ferry Messenger, and just promoting those volunteer opportunities. And then lastly, just to build some awareness around those volunteers, the work they do, and just those opportunities that exist, for making sure that there's name tags, T-shirts, whatever, to promote those opportunities at public events, and also, again, provide that recognition. So I know you guys are short on time, but hopefully that gives a nice recap of the day that we spent together, and some thoughts on next steps for how to continue this work. So I'll turn it back to you, and if there's any questions from the group.
Well, I have a comment, or just something that occurred to me during the conversation we just finished about the DEI committee and some of the things that they're doing. We talk about wanting to hear about people's lived experiences, and everybody's busy and, can't come to a lot of meetings. So I wonder if there's a way to, I don't know what it might be, a real easy checklist or survey, or just like an open question that is provided by the DEI committee to the boards and commissions, so that when they might discover something, I mean, maybe somebody comes to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee and says, I just wanted to let you know that this aspect of the park could change, and it would work out better for me. Or something about the housing, we're going to hear these lived experience stories in different aspects of the city running itself. It might be when somebody pays their water bill, they might say something. So does that make, I know you collect the comments, but is there a way to kind of route them through this so that we can hear more of them?
Well, we've started the process of taking city departments through the DEI process, but maybe there's a way that we could kind of mirror that on the...
There just might be something to discover in a comment or two each year that would be a really valuable discovery.
Yeah, and we have talked about ways we can elevate our volunteers through social media and through having maybe more irregular kind of volunteer appreciation events, and also highlighting various members of boards and commissions.
And things that we're doing well, things that we could do better.
Yeah, sure.
Any other comments on the retreat? Go ahead.
Just that I look forward to our next one, because it did seem that it was quite popular, and people appreciated that opportunity to converse and engage with each other and share what's going on and interact. And so I look forward to further interactions and hope that it can become a regular thing. One thing, that struck me when we asked, how do people want to be recognized? And so often the comments were, well, I really care about this work. I'm doing it because I care, and they see the value of the work. And so one of the ways that we can help feed that is giving even more opportunity to do that work with each other, or to, share what's happening with one board or another. How could they work together? Because they truly care about the work. That's why they're doing it, So I think that the value of these types of interactions is really great. Thank you so much to staff for putting this on this year. It was very valuable. Thank you.
Well said. I wish I had been able to have more conversations with people. It seemed to go fast. Maybe next time we can do whatever is the appropriate term for speed tea or speed lemonade dates, and we can move from table to table and meet more people. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah.
All right, so thank you, Sarah. We're back on track on time, and now we are going to be able to talk about the statewide Transportation Improvement Fund planning for fiscal year 24-25. And we've got 15 minutes for this. And then, just so everybody knows, we're going to spend 30 minutes on Frog Pond East and South Master Plan after that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Hello.
And community. I'm Kelsey Lewis. I'm the Grants and Programs Manager at SMART, City of Wilsonville SMART. And as you said, we're here to just briefly talk about our statewide transportation improvement fund DIP plan for the biennium that covers fiscal year 24 and 25. So we are currently in our planning period now for the 22-23. This is the next upcoming period. And first of all, we just wanted to talk about the planning process and where we are in that process. Right now, during summer of 22, we have developed a brief planning document with our projects and approximate dollar amounts for those. We are going to submit that to TriMet to be included in their plan as the qualified entity for our area. And then that our projects and our plan goes in time through TriMet all the way to ODOT and ultimately to be approved by the Oregon Transportation Commission in time for the year to start. So we're right at the beginning, and we'll go right through that process. So talking a little bit about where the revenues come from and where we are planning to send them. We went over this briefly in the staff report, but our funding that we're anticipating for this new time period, so the funding that will be actually received in this year, these 2 years, are $3.6 million. We have prior year unspent funds that we just haven't been able to spend yet, and so that kind of rolls into the new plan period of $1.5 million. This next category, regional coordination, is funds that TriMet specifically puts towards connections that other agencies can make, sort of gaps in service, and that is $3.4 million going towards this plan period. And then STF, Special Transportation Fund funding, is being incorporated into the coming fiscal year. So this is money that we already received in STF funding of $0.6 million is now going to be incorporated into the STIF plan period. So we're essentially just bringing that into the fold. And that's the $9.1 million in revenue. And then there, you can see on the screen, our project categories for planning, operations, and capital. These are rough numbers. We're just the estimate stage. We've gotten some pretty rough estimates from ODOT on what that funding will look like, and so we've split them out. And from here, I'm going to hand this over to Eric Loomis to discuss in more detail the projects themselves.
Good evening, councilors and mayor. I'm Eric Loomis. I'm the Transit Operations Manager for SMART. And so we broke these projects into those three categories: the planning, operations, and capital. So for planning, we have an STIF coordinator that we're planning on bringing on board to help us with the majority of the reporting of these. Through ODOT and TriMet, we have a lot of reporting requirements to report on where the money goes to these different projects and whatnot. So we're going to bring someone on to help us with that funding. And we have an annual audit that we're obligated to do every year as well, that we turn into the QE, the qualified entity, which for us is TriMet. So that's part of the planning funds. We also have the transit-oriented development customer service piece. So if you've heard of the TOD, transit-oriented development, that is planned for Wilsonville Transit Center, we're setting aside some funding for planning or the development of the customer service piece of that TOD that we're very excited about to put in the bottom floor there to assist with our customers, potentially not just for SMART, but for the region of transit. We also have the Basalt Creek Service Study coming into this biennium to look at what transit services we can provide as streets and businesses start going into that area. And then an overall signage update. Part of the signage update for bus stop signs and shelters would include some technology that we're already incorporating into several bus stops that have high use right now, and this would just continue that process along. For operations, we have continued services that we're currently operating on routes 1X, 2X, and R7, which is to Salem, to Tualatin Park and Ride, and then a medical shuttle up to Meridian Health Center, Legacy Health Center, and then some neighborhood shuttles such as the Route 7. And so the operations funding will just continue to fund those that we've operated since the beginning of STIF funding. And then a new service to Clackamas Town Center, which we're really excited about. We're partnering with Clackamas County and Washington County, along with Ride Connection with that, to provide service with a few different stops, trying to make an express service to Clackamas Town Center with connections to the airport and other services on the east side, whereas now you have to go through downtown area. So hopefully to expedite transportation services to that area. And that all hinges on Bus on Shoulder with ODOT partnership we've had to expand it onto the I-205 corridor. And then Woodburn as well. Chariots is going to be starting a service between Kaiser Station to Woodburn to Wilsonville in the fall, and we would like to follow suit with that in this next biennium as well to increase frequency for that route. And then our out-of-town medical shuttle Dial-A-Ride, as Kelsey mentioned, the STIF funding is moving under, the STF funding, Special Transportation Fund, is moving under STIF. And so part of that is the medical shuttle that we operate through STF funds. And we are looking forward to also expanding that as the demand is very high for medical trips into the greater metro area from Wilsonville. And then for our capital projects, we want to continue expanding our electric charging infrastructure. And that's a small part of the facility expansion we're going to be doing in the yard, almost doubling the size of our lots. As part of the route operating expansion, we need to expand our infrastructure to allow for more buses, more charging, and more CNG as well, compressed natural gas. And the last piece there is match grants for buses and bus stops. So the majority of our funding for buses comes from federal funding, federal dollars. And we typically use that an 20% match locally. We're able to use that 20% match through STIF rather than the local payroll. So that will come out of STIF as well. And with that, we'll take any questions or comments that the council may have.
Well, I hate to be the first one again, but I do have something. Looking back at our previous section that we just discussed with the council goals and board retreats, there's an abbreviated description of our goals under transportation and mobility, and it reflects the goal to expand our local transit to city borders and also increase our connection to other cities. And I see that we're doing that to some degree, but it just brings up something that people bring up to me a lot, and that is the goal of having the 98 Express bus more accessible to Wilsonville travelers. You have to catch it now at the Holiday Inn. You can't catch it at our transit center, and I know there are a number of reasons for that. And we also have our Frog Pond East and West that we're going to be talking about, and I know that this plan is to expand bus routes to areas with a high percentage of low-income households. We're going to be having a lot of different housing in that area, and I want to make sure that, is there anything we should do with the STIF funding plan that can help us with the goal of expanding our local transit to our city borders, basically?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So we in the past, we actually did in our very first plan put funding in for the Frog Pond area, and it didn't quite come to fruition through, we didn't use that funding. It was a little too early on set for transit study for that area. So we're actually incorporating that study into the upcoming transit master plan that Kelsey is actually launching this summer. We're already starting to work on that. And so that'll be a piece of that plan. So we can get transit into that area, into Frog Pond, and I'm working with engineering and planning as well as they start some of the early on designs for that area.
Council President Ackerbaum.
Thank you. I did have one question about the new services that you mentioned to Clackamas Town Center and to Woodburn. Now, is the 80X, is that Clackamas Town Center? Am I referring to it by the correct name? I noticed in our packet it said 80X at one point, like 80X. I wondered if that's the new shorthand for Clackamas Town Center. I didn't know.
I believe that's the 80X service to Woodburn, which is the service that Cherries is starting up, that will go to Kaiser Station and then through Woodburn.
Okay, so 80X is Woodburn. But I was curious, as those new routes come to fruition, what the plans are for notifying some of our employers about the possibilities there for moving workforce, because I do believe, we're all familiar, there's a lot of people that come into Wilsonville to work, at our multiple employers, and some of the people may be coming from some of those areas and would benefit from using transit if they know that it exists. So how do we share that message with all of our employers so that it can be utilized?
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as we get the green, well, there's a couple hinges that we're waiting for. One is I mentioned the bus on shoulder through ODOT. Once we get the green light there, and then we are experiencing a shortage of vehicles, as is all transit agencies nationwide. So as soon as we get a couple more vehicles and the green light for the bus on shoulder, we will be marketing through our normal venues, and maybe Kelsey can talk a little bit more about that, but Michelle Marston is great about getting that word out. She has a good relationship with employers in town, large and small, and we will certainly be marketing this new route and the schedule that we have. It will be high frequency. High frequency for SMART is about 30 minutes commuter times, and then hourly, midday, and later in the evenings. So we are going to be putting a lot of funding sources, funds towards this route, resources towards this route. And a lot of that comes through that RCP, again, Kelsey mentioned, that it's directly from TriMet in addition to our normal STIF funds.
Okay, thank you. And go ahead, please.
I just wanted to mention, since you gave me a perfect opportunity, that we also just launched a van pool program. We're really excited about it. We've been talking with a lot of employers in town about the van pool program. So anyone traveling for work, starting or ending in Wilsonville, is eligible to take part in a van pool. So it just needs 5 people, and we could start a van pool. So we're really actively working with employers in town. In addition to our transit, our fixed route plans, service, we also have van pools available for people, which is a very flexible kind of way to help people get into town or out of town for work. So we're really excited about this program. We're launching it. Anyone who has questions, please, we're so excited. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about that.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thank you.
Councillor Lehan.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that we got a letter earlier in the month from someone who had moved to McMinnville and works in Sherwood, and said that the transit time, to take transit from between Wilsonville and Sherwood is over 2 hours, and it's about 5.5 miles, and it's less than an hour from McMinnville to Sherwood. So it's a he was just mentioning it as one of those things, but it seems to me that increasingly we are developing a through route on the Beckman-Tews-Baker route between Wilsonville and Sherwood. It has become a commuter route, particularly since Tualatin Sherwood is frequently congested. So they're coming across the backside of Villebois, but I think we need to recognize in employment centers that certainly Tualatin and Wilsonville and increasingly Sherwood are major industrial employment centers, and we need to maybe look at those 3 hubs as industrial hubs, and because they all 3 are also significant residential hubs, and how we're able to move people amongst those without sending them into Portland and back again, or Oregon City, or far, far away before you can get to Sherwood.
So
Yeah.
will that be addressed?
Yeah, Thank you, Councilor. Not in this current plan. We have looked at that in the past, a direct route to Sherwood. Right now, the connection, we have about half-hour frequency or hourly midday to Tualatin, and the shortcoming there is getting from Tualatin to Sherwood, either through TriMet or Yamhill County is the other one that goes through Sherwood, but it's only a few times a day. So that's where the time doesn't really line up very well. So we certainly are interested in serving that connection, the intercity connectivity. I think we might look at starting that through the van pool option to begin with to see what ridership looks like. And then typically from there, we would expand it into a fixed route as ridership kind of came there. So certainly of interest to us, and through the Transit Master Plan planning process, community outreach, we will be looking for those comments.
Well, that circles back to the van pool idea again, maybe, and we just had our business summit that we're going to talk about later, and maybe the thrill of talking about van pool to get workers to work may draw more attendees and responses. So I see that Councilor Linville has a comment or question.
I do. While I think all of these comments are relevant to the development of the Transit Master Plan, I think what we're talking about right here is just the STIF funds and the budget for the STIF funds. And all of those other pieces, if I'm not incorrect, Eric and Kelly, will be addressed at some point in the master planning process. This is only a portion of that. This is an update to the master plan for the STIF funds, correct? So we're really confining ourselves to what this plan is that you have identified for the use of these funds. I just wanted to commend you for development of a plan that was 120% of the anticipated revenue. Smart thinking there to be able to do that so that we have that leeway for, above anticipated revenue that might come in and be able to spend those funds. I think the plan looks really great. I don't have any recommendations for any changes in what the STIF funding plan is.
Thank you for that concise summary. And with that, if there are no other comments, have we given you the feedback that you need? Kelsey and Eric?
I believe so, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, keep up the great work. Thank you very much. So we do have two more items. We have our Frog Pond East Master Plan now for 30 minutes, and I was just reminded that our City Council meeting starts at 7:30, so we have room for one more item after this.
Good evening, Council. Daniel Pauly, Planning Manager, and good to be with you again to talk more Frog Pond. I'll start my video here so you can see my smiling face. So we want to share what's been going on and get the Council's further direction as we continue this undertaking. So tonight's work session is going to review the land use alternatives that you have in your packet for Frog Pond East and South. Particularly, we'll focus the limited time we have tonight on the residential mix and and this will include talking about what all are the alternatives, as well as what input has gone into getting where we are. After discussing the three alternatives, we will share the direction of the preferred alternative based on Planning Commission direction from their meeting on June 8th. So it is important to keep in mind again, how we got to these alternatives. The Frog Pond Area Plan that was adopted back in 2015 is a foundation. We've stated that before in our work sessions and in our documentation. It is a starting point. And as we discussed, a lot has happened since the area plan adoption in 2015, including the council's focus on equity and housing affordability. The alternatives were thus informed by both the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan and the Affordable Housing Analysis specific to this area developed previously and developed earlier in the process and presented to council this past winter. These inputs accumulated in a series of design concepts. We discussed the last work session that we'll revisit briefly tonight, and that all served as the basis of the alternatives. In addition, we have done public engagement, which I'll describe a bit more in a minute, and much more detail on that is in your packet. All of this together is what the Planning Commission thoughtfully weighed and considered in developing the direction they gave on a preferred alternative. And I will mention with me tonight, I do have Joe Dills from MIG, who's the lead for the consultant team, and I will turn it over to him to talk us through briefly again the community design concepts and remind us of those that we discussed in our last work session.
Hi, council members. Good to be with you. This is a recap. The key design concepts that have been studied and discussed with the Planning Commission and you and the community. We shared all of these with everybody that has been involved in the last 6 weeks or so in preparing the alternatives. Start with housing, variety throughout the planning area, affordable housing integration opportunities. If we go back one slide, what we call a transect of densities, which is just a smooth transition for where the buildings are larger or more dense and into medium into lower areas. Neighborhood commercial center, connectivity for both streets and bikes and natural areas. And then if we could go to the next slide. Preservation of important trees and other resources, and the other resources captures the interest in historic resources, and Dan has been compiling information about those. Active park and open recreation space, the BPA easement, many ideas for what could be done there. The Grange, of course, as a civic amenity. And then breaking the area into sub-areas within the neighborhoods so that each of those has its own kind of walkability and intent behind it. So those are the design concepts that we carried into the alternatives. I'm going to toss it back to Dan.
Thanks, Joe. And I'll mention particularly on other resources. Since we last spoke, we have looked in more detail at all the residential structures out there year built, and particularly those that are older. We've looked at ones that appear to have been highly modified versus are similar to the original construction. And certainly that is part of what we're reviewing. We've looked the Grange, we've been working on getting contact with the Grange representative to talk to them more. That's an ongoing effort, but all of those historic resources are part of what we're considering as we move forward and get into more detail on the design. So with that, let's jump into the engagement activities. May was from particularly late April, particularly through the month of May. There was a lot going on there. Kept the team really busy. And we're able to reach a variety of groups, and here's just a quick synopsis of the different activities that happened. We had a number of different focus groups, as well as a community design workshop and online survey. And just share a bit about these. The online survey was predominantly taken by existing Wilsonville homeowners. The community design workshop did tend to be developers and a few residents that tend to be engaged, very engaged. The focus groups did include a wider variety, including the Hispanic community members, immigrants, other people of color, renters, and people interested in being first-time home buyers. So through this variety, we're able to get a lot of different perspectives and see where they align and where they don't align. So it was a really helpful exercise that help us focus where we're going. And some key themes, there's more again in your packet, but interest in a variety of housing continues to be something, especially detached, and that's across, and finding different forms, even including like cottages and things like that, that people tend to still like that idea of having detached. Some questions did, okay, if that's not a feasible alternative because of cost, what would be your next choice? We saw townhouses really come up in that. Not overall a lot of support for like the condo or apartment configuration, but that's not saying that there's not community members out there that would benefit from that configuration as well. So we continue work with, so that tells us we have a lot of work to continue to work with the development community to innovate and find solutions. And again, a big part of this project is to keep these options open. And not define it so much that we don't prevent future innovations in the housing market from happening. And we'll get into that a bit tonight, but we'll talk kind of some of that finer scale of how we implement that variety and those different needs in future work sessions as well. So with that, let's go ahead and go into the 3 draft land use alternatives. You have a memo in your packet that describes how we got to these, but I want to highlight a couple things that for those listening that may have not read all the memos, some key things, particularly when we're talking about housing type and what we mean by that, because it's not necessarily what you'd historically, we're not talking housing types in terms of multifamily, middle housing, and single family per se. We're talking more about urban design, and each of these urban design types has a variety, is assumed to have a variety in it. So that means there's housing variety in each neighborhood. There's still, while there's variety in that neighborhood from a design component, there is still a logical transition of building size and density. We divide it into 3 basic housing forms, which I'll re-describe here in a moment. There's a focus on affordable choices, and also a mind to cottage-style homes and ADUs and those type of options, which are enabled in each type that I'll describe. So type 1, and just I'll reiterate the quick description we have of these, is most similar. I put in here things that is similar to, but it's not exactly similar to all of these, but probably the best reference point. So it's similar to, type 1 is similar to the Wilsonville Village Center beyond the core apartments around the piazza. And this includes townhouses, condo apartments, closely spaced detached homes on smaller lots of around 3,000 square feet. Type 2 housing is similar to areas of Villalwa, kind of on the edges beyond the village center, and the small lot areas of Frog Pond West, such as Morgan Farm. And this may include small to medium detached homes, along with duplexes, triplexes, variety of plexes, 2 to 4 unit townhouse buildings, small condo apartment buildings, where the typical lot ranges from 3 to 5,000 square feet. Type 3 housing is similar to the medium to large areas of Frog Pond West and single-family areas such as Renaissance at Canyon Creek. However, there would be expected a lot more variety. The urban form would be similar to that, but you'd have a lot more plexes and things and townhouse units in there as well. As well as what we call cluster housing, which are multiple detached homes of similar architecture on a single lot, as well as small apartment condo buildings, with typical buildings sitting on 6 to 10,000 square feet of land. So with that in mind, I will turn it back to Joe to describe the 3 draft alternatives.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Maybe start with a little map orientation here. You see in the middle of the slide, in the middle of each plan, is an east-west street. That, for your reference, is Advance Road, Southwest Advance. And then on the left-hand side of the colored areas, of course, is Stafford Road as it meets Wilsonville Road. So the three alternatives came out of the engagement activities that we were talking about a moment ago, particularly the online workshop where participants took those little land use chips you just saw and placed them around the map. And we included pictures of those in your packet. Alternative A on the left has its type 1 housing focused more towards Stafford Road. That's the brown color. And you can see how the transect of density or housing form, basically goes from west to east. Alternative B in the middle of the slide orients the type 1 housing a little bit more to Advance Road and brings it towards the center of the east neighborhood, north of Advance, and has a little different configuration for the type 2 housing in the south neighborhood. The alternative C on the right focuses the type 1 housing more towards the center of the east neighborhood, and then it's distinguished by all three types being in various degrees in the south neighborhood too. I think what is common to each of these for the south neighborhood, south of Advance Road, is that participants were open to the idea of a variety of housing in those areas, and alternative C kind of takes it to include all three types. So that's your overview of those, and Dan, I'm turning it back to you here for these following slides.
Sure. So I will note that alternative, so just quick numbers. So even though, there's a variety and still flexibility in these, that in terms of for planning purposes, you're just short of 1,600 units likely on alternative A, about 1,400 alternative B, and a little over 1,800 on alternative C. So in the end, after looking through all of this, the Planning Commission preferred a modified version, if you will, of alternative C. So let me describe what I mean there. So south of Advance, which we also call Frog Pond South, the commissioners that were there were all supportive of alternative C. They really liked the additional variety. They feel that really reflects what the discussion's been at the commission and council and what we've heard from feedback and integrating the widest variety of housing in that area. North of Advance, they were looking similar to alternative C with the following question had a continuing conversation: should density be focused along Stafford or more centrally to that area? Some concepts they talked about is some things considered is, they're both proximate to the commercial center and the park. One commissioner pointed out how the transition from Frog Pond West to Frog Pond East is more gradual with type 2 more along the Stafford Road corridor. And so there's not an abrupt edge there, in a way. Also, there's some possibility of additional parking being explored in the BPA easement that more intense housing, closer housing could benefit from. So there's a variety of things. I will note here that the commercial is shown here. That's what's been discussed as preferred. We're still doing some transportation studies to ensure that that's feasible. And so that can still shift, and just want to make the council aware of that. And hoping that by next work session, we'll be able to start provide some more clarity on that point. So really, the alternative C, the commission overall felt it best supports the equitable housing strategic plan, as well as the targets, enables the targets that we discussed under the affordable housing analysis, and provides that variety throughout that can integrate and provide different options where different types of housing, different types of people can live close to each other, and less geographic separation of unit types. So with that, really have 3 discussion questions for the council tonight. What additional questions you may have about the alternatives? I know there's a lot in the packet that we went through pretty quickly tonight. Does the council support the preferred alternative concepts closest to alternative C, consistent with the Planning Commission recommendation? And third, what additional feedback would the council offer as the project team develops the preferred alternative, which our goal is to bring back to you for a work session about this time next month.
Councilor Linville.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have some questions. I didn't see in here, and I did not get exactly from the discussion of the Planning Commission how Alternative C supports the equitable strategic plan, and specifically the affordable housing analysis. So can you, in a really brief way, identify how they thought that Alternative C met those 2 areas the best, or those 2?
Sure. So briefly, there's two components of that. The first one is geographic variety. So there's more areas in different land use types that are available for someone to purchase, or for the city or another entity to purchase to make any of those projects and available, versus if you limit which area or which ownership controls like all the type 1 land, then that really reduces your possibilities there.
So
and then just the basic is, the other part is just numbers. If there's more land that can be, because the affordable housing projects, as we discussed, tend to be multifamily or smaller cottages, and that's more enabled. And as you allow more units, that increases the availability of that just by math.
Okay. So thank you. That's helpful to me as I kind of give some of my feedback. I think that with the council goal of facilitating home ownership and the direction that even from the project team stated that the focus should be on housing form rather than units per acre, that kind of doesn't match with using that as a rationale for C. And I recognize that the difficulty in the outreach of getting our citizens to, in really good big numbers, to be able to interact is difficult. And I know we do an excellent job of getting that out. But we do need to recognize, I think, that we had, in the online, we had a very specific demographic that was answering in that online survey over that period of time. But it was still only 46 people. And that we don't, I don't know if there was a way for us to really zero out so that someone couldn't respond twice. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a registered page, so.
It is, okay, good. But in the other venues, there were really small numbers. But I really wanted to bring out the group that was done with the renters, because I'm concerned about renters. And I think I've verbalized this several times, how concerned I am. And from looking at their comments, many of them want to own, but they're just not at a place right now where they can. Here's where my concerns come with them, because they did identify that they've been displaced multiple times and that their rent has increased. And I recall from the affordable housing analysis that to get to 30% of the, to not be housing burdened for even a two-bedroom apartment in Wilsonville is difficult. It is very, very difficult. And the majority of the renters in the city of Wilsonville, by that analysis, are single. They do not have families. And so then we get to the housing types. I agree with the Planning Commission in terms of mixing houses within those areas. I think that's a grand thing. I think the Main Street concept for the commercial area is a really good one. I think the placement of it at Brisbane is also a better place than putting it up by the Grange. But I have concern about us using density as one of the determinants, as the 1,800 units. And I have some concerns about us putting the increasing percentage in those type 1 houses. And it's mostly because of the apartments and the rentals and us increasing our rental supply. And I just hope there was some way that we could get to affordable ownership rather than rental. And then I want to be sensitive also to those with differing abilities. Both in type 1 and type 2, it's recommended that those are 2 to 3 story dwellings. And so those would preclude most people that are differently able physically to be able to get into those units. And most of the type 3 housing would be single level. So aging in place and those with differing mobility abilities would actually be precluded from being in the majority of the housing because it would be over 80%.
So if I can just comment on that.
Sure.
While it's enabled, like in physical form, it's not required to be that tall, and we're anticipating the cottages or ADUs to be in all the areas.
Okay,
And
great.
part of kind of our additional policy discussion will be what percent of what should be encouraged or required in these different areas.
Sure.
Which can get to those concerns.
Sure. The problem I have conceptually with the 3 alternatives is that there are pieces of the other ones that are still as good, but because we now get to see, it changes. The percentage of the type of housing changes, but some of the concepts in C are really good. They're good, the mixture of the housing, and I think that was identified in some of the groups as well, that they like the idea of, in their own little maps of where they put the houses, that they put types 1, 2, and 3 kind of all over the entire area. And I understand that the type 1 housing close to the commercial center is desirable because it facilitates success of those commercial areas. And I just wonder, that's just a balance. Is that a good place for all of it to be centered around there, or the majority of it right there and by the park? are we doing it because we want the commercial center to be successful or because it's a good planning strategy? So I think those are my comments, so thanks.
So would you like to respond to that first before we hear from others?
So I would just say there's a number of factors that go into the location. Like I talked about parking access, the urban design, where it makes sense to have the transect from just an urban design standpoint. Also, it's the opposite way. We want the most people to have access to the amenities as well.
And the street, the vehicle access, because you need more than just the people living there probably to access those commercial areas.
Correct.
I have a question about the home ownership. Can you talk about, I know we can't really control a lot of this, but I want to find out how you have talk about how you've addressed first-time home ownership, basically.
Sure. So first part of this project is there's a separate where we're going to develop programs, and the city needs to work on that. But a big part of this is enabling that, where we're encouraging and enabling product types that lend themselves to first-time home ownership. And so that is really the focus of this land use exercise, is making sure that, and we'll talk as we get into more policy the next couple of work sessions about how we mix that, making sure that that we do get to those product types that lend themselves to first-time home ownership.
Super. Okay, Council President Ackerball.
I have a clarifying question that I think you kind of spoke to, but I want to get some confirmation on that. And that is around the cottage cluster homes, because I noticed in one of the surveys, I think, it was like, if you couldn't afford to be in your first choice of home, which may be single family, which, I mean, sidebar here, it was interesting to see that there's a variety of what people want. Some people want single family, some people want smaller units, some people want something that's more affordable, right? I mean, there was really a variety. But in that survey, I believe there were many people that were currently single family homeowners and wanted single family, but then a question of what else would you want if you couldn't afford single family. And like you said, the townhomes was a high response, and also the cottage cluster was high. So I'm curious about the cottage cluster, and does that go on type 1, type 2, and type 3, or does it go more on type 3? Or if we had type 3, how do we make sure that it actually materializes, that we get something that looks like a cottage cluster, in that mix that is all over the project area? Because it occurs to me that maybe some of these cottage clusters could also be the first-time home owner entry points too, right? So I just wonder if you could talk around that piece and what we might be looking at there.
So I'll try to do it really concisely here. So certainly kind of the cottage cluster around a central courtyard type 2 or type 3 would lend more to that. However, cottage types on more individual lots that may not be around a courtyard would be more predominant in a type 1. So, and also want to reiterate that the allowance of ADUs and the encouragement of ADUs can, especially when you consider in the middle housing land division that the council adopted, that can allow a lot of cottage type ownership as well. And so, it'd be throughout.
And so how do we make sure that it actually happens?
We're exploring policy concepts, which we'll talk about in future work sessions, about requiring and encouraging different mixes. That's something, I think, a tool that we're talking about is, this amount should be attached, this amount should be cottage. I mean, we can talk about what extent we want to go there in terms of actually setting policy to ensure that the policy objectives are met.
Okay. Councilor West.
Traditionally, ADUs kind of have like a very specific kind of format, right? Like above the garage, daylight basement, that's an ADU, a little piece of the property that's kind of maybe there's like a garage that's been partially converted into ADU, something like that. So what creative ways and how are we different in orchestrating ADUs in different property types in this? So like, could a duplex also have ADUs with it? Could cottage clusters have the ADUs? And how is it different than maybe we traditionally see it, where we don't, which maybe is been prohibitive to them being done more often, but like what are we thinking of creative ways to orchestrate those ADUs in this plan?
Yeah, and there's a memo from a couple work sessions ago, and I won't go into deep detail about it, but we looked at policy changes that would better encourage. One example is currently you have to have a larger lot for a townhouse, like essentially a lot the equivalent size of a single family lot, detached single family lot, to be allowed an ADU, so allowing it for all townhouses. And that is one big step there. And also allowing it for all the configurations, whether it's like a ground floor of a townhouse, or it's, above a detached garage, or a detached structure that's divided off and sold separately, really looking at all those alternatives and enabling all those alternatives.
Do we see any other communities in Oregon or in the Portland area trying to be as creative with making that happen? Or we see some good examples coming out of that?
Yeah, Tigard in particular has done quite a bit of innovative stuff around being very different ways of allowing ADUs, even allowing multiple ADUs on properties and all sorts of things.
So you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. That's good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so today, are you looking for our direction on these different types, or has this been a rather global series of comments?
So global series, it is helpful. So just project kind of critical timeline wise, we need preferred alternative. So we can, and getting to Council Linville's comments about density, the reason we're looking at density, even though we're allowing is we need density to plan infrastructure, right? Or assume density, or kind of ballpark density, so we know, how many pipes and roads to plan for. And so that's why we get into these numbers. So that's what we're looking for at this point, though some of the blobs may move around, to confirm that kind of the direction we got from Planning Commission is the right track, so we can get something developed that our engineering and our infrastructure and traffic engineers can use to start planning.
Is that your number? Council President Ackerball.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? Because I think for me, the confusion then is when I see like density numbers and we're looking at the different maps and the shading for type 1, type 2, type 3, wouldn't those numbers change if our type 3 had more cottage cluster or ADUs? You know what I mean? Like that's where I think I'm having a hard time understanding how the number aligns, because really within that shading there's a menu of different options of homes and therefore units of homes that could be within the space.
Yeah, so it's not as precise with residential as it used to be, and Joe may have a quick comment. I know we need to get Matt up here. Is that there is some educated guesses based on maybe market, what would tend to be built, and it's not as precise. But on the other hand, our infrastructure planners are used to that, because when you're like, for example, when you're planning industrial, you don't know if it's going to be a warehouse or something that is more a manufacturer that's a more intense use of water. So there has to be some assumptions there. So we're kind of more doing some educated guesses of what the mix might be within there in order to do our best to plan infrastructure.
Councilor Linville.
So would you agree then, Dan, that getting to Councilor Ackerball's question is that by increasing the number of units in type 1, we're really just talking multifamily. We're talking apartments. And that's why that number increases the number.
I mean, it could be townhouses or, I mean, even closely spaced cottages, when they're on smaller lots closer together, you're going to get more units.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, did you have anything quickly to add to the infrastructure planning piece and density? I know you've thought a lot about this on this and other projects.
Yeah, the idea, the concept of a range within each land use type, and I'll take one as an example, is carried into the numbers by selecting average numbers. So for the type 1, we've assumed 25 units to the acre. That could be some cottages that are 12 to 15 units per acre, townhouses that are closer to 20, 25, and then some more dense type could be either multifamily or small townhome that gets close to 30. So it's an average representing the range of possibilities.
Does the council, have you had enough time to consider making a recommendation? I want to make sure that we do have that amount of time. I'm considering that I would like more time with this.
Between A, B, and C, we're supposed to be
Yes.
making a recommendation. Yeah, I don't know that I'm ready to say one of those. And I'm presuming that that somewhere in here there's a minimum. It's not just an average, this and that. In other words, there was a minimum number of units with Villebois in order to carry the infrastructure.
Yeah, there'd be minimum, I mean, from that perspective, and there's also minimums prescribed by the metro annexation, so.
Yeah, yeah. So the minimums are what? And are they the same in all three? Minimum dwelling units?
The minimum dwelling units, I don't know that you've calculated the minimum dwelling units, Joe. I mean, these numbers are average.
Well, their average, I can maybe provide a reference point, is that in the past, before middle housing, and actually it's still on the books with Metro, 80% of what you project of what used to be a maximum would be the minimum. So at this stage of the planning, before we've gotten to the regulatory specifics about minimums, I think you could take these numbers that we have estimated to date, and a representative minimum would be 80% of each of them.
So then, if you feel you have more time, I'd ask that, is there specific information? Is it just more time to digest, or is there specific information you'd still like?
Well, first of all, tonight we have one more item on the agenda. Can I just ask, do we have an alternative way to handle that in 10 minutes?
I don't know. I think you're going to need more than 10 minutes, aren't you?
I'm happy to come back a different time. I think the topic probably deserves more than 10 minutes.
Yeah,
I think so too. I didn't know if we can move it ahead or what.
I don't think there's any pressing timelines on it, is there?
Certainly not. I think it dovetails and it informs this frog pond conversation to a degree. So it is timely, but does it have to be tonight? I don't think so.
Okay. Well, how about we queue it up for the next one?
Okay, sorry, Matt. Well, so considering I want to go back to Councillor Linville's comments earlier, and I'm not sure that I heard from your comments. If you are recommending that you agree, did you hear enough with item version the C, the alternative C, that meets your expectations from what you heard?
I am fine with alternative C, but I am not convinced that the percentages of the types within there is something that I feel comfortable supporting.
And the percentages of types would probably affect the number of housing units.
Well, it is, I think, as Mr. Pauly said, it may or may not. I mean, it just depends, but, I mean, as I look at this, under C of the 1,800 units, 36% is type 1, 49% is type 2, and type 3 is 14%. And those are pretty significantly different numbers than is in A, in alternative A. And I don't know, maybe there's a happy medium in there where we, you know, I guess I'm not convinced that type 1 gives us more home ownership and more flexible housing types for all of our citizens. To me, just the first blush at it looks like it is just the increasing of the density in type 1 and the kind of type 1. So,
and go ahead.
So I know, I mean, we had an hour-and-a-half conversation on this to work through this, get to this point with Planning Commission, which we're not going to have that luxury here at Council. So I guess what specific things would you need us to bring back or additional information to send you in the interim to help you get to a point where you're ready to give direction on this?
Well, I think that one thing that appeals to me about the type 3 housing form is, you can convince me otherwise, but I think it does give some opportunity for home ownership with some condos, some entry-level home ownership in the cottage clusters. And if we're looking at, you know, the multifamily for-rent apartment complexes really have a role, and I know that we need some of that, but yet they end up being owned by out-of-state interests oftentimes, and the rental increases are something we really can't control here. We are going to be building hopefully everything's going along well for our 100 and some units at the West Station, which will be affordable units, and that we will be developing some other great housing opportunities at Town Center. And so with Frog Pond being, you know, a unique part of the housing expansion in our area, I just want to make sure that we're able to offer home ownership not only to families, but also to, you know, very small families and single people who want to start out with their first home. And the jump between A and C is just really, really big.
So some questions that maybe, let's go back to urban design a bit. So when you're talking distance between buildings, is there a strong preference that there's 10, 15 feet between buildings versus 6 feet between buildings? Or is it more the concern that it's functional and that there are, you know, single level ownership for a variety of people? So is it more the type or urban design? So I think answering that question about is there policy direction on how close the council is comfortable having homes together? Because that's the other part. I mean, the closer they are, the more you can get in there and the more opportunity, more people you can serve. But there needs to be a variety of each, obviously, in a transect, but what should there be more of?
Can I ask a question here? Of A, B, and C, which would you say Villebois is most like, and which would you say Charbonneau is most like?
Well, Charbonneau is denser than a lot of people than it's perceived on the outside because it is so much single level. I mean, the village center is So I don't have the calculations
But I mean,
compared to this.
in the mix here,
In the mix here,
of the percentage mixes, Villebois and Charbonneau, I know they're different, but I mean, it's easier for me to think about those, they're all three going to be different, but than just colors on the picture, on a page and a map. If I think about the divisions of,
I need some time to really think about it. I think that's a good question. And kind of, that might be to mock them up and similar. But yeah, I couldn't point to that off the top of my head without giving it some more thought, without saying, well, on the other hand, it could be more like this. But
yeah. Because they both have all three types. I mean, both Charbonneau and Villebois in very different applications or forms have all three types in a mix throughout those developments. And, and so it's a way to sort of picture what we've done before.
Well, going by the shading, C looks like it's more integrated.
And that's something that
Probably the big
Planning
difference
Commission-
is what you had said at the beginning.
Yeah, what Planning Commission picked up on.
That's what that was probably the concept on C that I liked the most.
Go ahead.
And if I might offer a suggestion, if the council is comfortable with the general patterning of C, but has the interest referred tonight in sort of having comparables for the mixes and maybe some more specifics about the mixes relative to home ownership, we could work on those two aspects between now and next council, and frankly, I think they're directly central to now and next planning commission, which will happen in between. So those will be the two areas that I'd say we come back with more specifics on the comparables and the mixes within types.
And one of the things that we've said from the beginning is that we're looking to break some ground and have some unique approaches to home ownership, because all over this Willamette Valley, you can find places, I mean, we have rental units available, and that's just going to continue. And what can we do to be unique here to help people have more of a stake in their financial future? So go ahead.
You go ahead.
Okay. I appreciate that plan kind of going forward, Mr. Dills. And I mean, looking at the alternative C, I guess, the positives of this is helpful, some feedback here. The positives that I see with the alternative C is it has the 5 different neighborhood destinations, right? There's kind of like that additional little park space that's off of the commercial area. I think that having those sorts of neighborhood community destinations, gathering places has huge value for the project. And so I like seeing that versus the alternative A didn't, it had less in that area. And so I think, especially coming out of these last 2 years, having these outdoor gathering spaces is really a great amenity for everyone, every type of home that's within that frog pond. It's great to have those things. So I think that's a benefit. I wonder about the types of housing that is surrounding that commercial area. I see the point from the Planning Commission about kind of transitioning coming from Frog Pond West in. I wonder how that plays with the success of the commercial area. Should we have more of the perhaps multifamily or smaller units, whatever form that takes around. However, the comment about, there might be some ability to have creative parking solutions with this BPA if it's just a little bit further over close to the park, that sounds good, because parking did come up in the feedback, the focus groups, that people want to have parking, and we want to be mindful, because again, that serves the entire area. And so I'm curious about this thought about having some creative parking there, and let's leverage that. I think that C has the benefit of having a mix of different housing types through the whole area, and doing it in a way that is, quality homes, and aesthetically, it works. It makes sense, right? The flow is good. And so I think that when we see these different buckets, type 1, type 2, type 3, and then we're trying to pinpoint, what does type 1 really mean? What does type 2 really mean? What does type 3? That's where it gets confusing, and we're like, oh, but I don't know exactly what I'm signing up for, here. And so maybe we can have some further discussion on that. But the bones, I think, in the thought of where we're going is good in this alternative C. So that's kind of where I sit tonight.
Thank you. So I think we're out of time. It's 7:30, and I'm going to personally make some time to meet with staff about this between now and the next meeting, and I hope some of the other counselors will too.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. So with that, I think I will adjourn our work session, and we will adjourn in 7 minutes. Are we still using that? How about 3 minutes? 7:33. I know we have people waiting to come in. I will call to order a meeting of the Wilsonville City Council for Monday, June 20th at 7:34 p.m. Will the city recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Linville.
Here.
Councillor West.
Here.
Council President Ockervall.
Here.
Councillor Lehan.
Here.
Mayor Fitzgerald.
Here. Will the city manager lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Council President Ockervall, may I have a motion to approve the following order of agenda?
Your Honor, I move we approve our order of agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion is moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. That brings us to the first item on mayor's business, which I'm happy to say is talking about the Wilsonville Wildcats. And I'm going to read a proclamation for Wilsonville Wildcats Week. And after that, we have a presentation for each one of you. So it's really amazing what our Wilsonville athletes have been able to do. It's just been an incredible year all across the board, and it's not in any kind of an easy year to have an incredible year. So congratulations. And this is the second time within a month that the City Council is celebrating with Wilsonville high school students, parents, teachers, coaches, staff, and the community for a Wildcats triumph. Let me now read the proclamation. Whereas Wilsonville residents honor the faculty and administration of Wilsonville High School for providing a well-rounded education that includes extracurricular activities that aid in the development of life skills, and whereas the Wilsonville Wildcats girls varsity golf team is representative of the high school's commitment to sportsmanship, excellence, and personal development, and whereas these Wildcats have excelled in the classroom where they were named the 5A academic state champions, and whereas this 2022 Wildcat team earned the Northwest Oregon Conference NWOC championship, and whereas Wilsonville's dominance continued into the 5A state championship in the Emerald Valley Golf Club in Cresswell, as the Wildcats took charge on day one to build a commanding 21-stroke lead, and whereas the team retained its focus on the second and final day of the tournament and cruised to a 31-stroke victory to secure state title, and whereas senior Paris Wilhelm achieved a third-place finish among all individuals competing to lead the Wildcats to victory, and whereas Wilhelm was joined on the leaderboard by senior Emma Doherty, 9th place, junior Mia Combs at 11th place, freshman Madeline Downey, 19th place, and freshman Malia Calicilo, 46th place. And whereas Wilhelm and Combs earned first team all NWOC honors, and whereas Doherty and Downey earned second team all NWOC honors, and whereas Wilhelm was recognized as Northwest Oregon Conference Player of the Year, and whereas on Tuesday, May 17th, 2022, under the guidance of NWOC's 5A Coach of the Year, Chris Benzel, and assistant coach Cindy Anderson, these Wildcats joined the 2017 team as just the second Wilsonville team to capture the girls' state championship title. And whereas this Wilsonville girls varsity golf team displayed exemplary sportsmanship and excelled against 5A competition, while their success on the course and in the classroom generated positive attention, excitement, and community pride, and inspired the Wilsonville community. Now therefore, the Wilsonville City Council proclaims June 20th to 24th, 2022 as Wilsonville Wildcats Week. The Wilsonville City Council commends the passion, resilience, and sportsmanship demonstrated by Wilsonville High School students, parents, and community members, and we congratulate the members of the 2021 Wildcats Girls Varsity Golf Team for winning a state championship. Now I would like to invite the Wildcats Girls Varsity Golf Team up here in a circle of the dais for a photo op with the city council members.
Yeah, well,
No, wait, before we do that, excuse me. Right now, what we're going to do is read all of the names, and I'd like to ask Councilor Joanne Linville to do that for us, and with the city manager, present the proclamations.
So on behalf of the City Council, we want to congratulate you all. And we have copies of the proclamations for you. And so when I read your name, if you'll come forward, then we will give you your proclamation, and then we will have a photograph with all of the City Council. So first, I'd like to recognize head coach Chris Benzel. And I believe your assistant coach is not here?
No, she's not.
She's not. Next, Paris Wilhelm. Emma Doherty. And Madeline Downey. And Malia Kilakilo, she's not here this evening? Okay, so we have one for her, and then we have one for your assistant coach too, as well. All right? So, oh, we have one more.
We missed some.
Oh, we don't have your name. Oh, Mia. I'm sorry, Mia. I went right over your name. Mia Combs.
Congratulations, Mia. Thank you. Yeah. Coach, did you want to say a few words
Yes.
before we do a picture? About your team?
You want to say something about your team and how your year went?
Imagine that my mother-in-law puts me on the spot. Imagine that. No, thank you very much, Council. We went from having 3 girls and not really being able to compete because you count 4 scores to being state champions in 1 year. So being around the 9, sometimes 11, was an amazing thing when you're around high school energy. And not only are these gals great golfers, but they're just great human beings and kind of remind you what life's all about, having fun, smiling, you know, goofing around, especially this one to my left, always smiling, giggling. Anyways, but they're amazing. Thank you for honoring them. They really worked hard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll all go down and gather for the picture?
We'll have you come up and stand in here, and we'll just take a quick picture of everything.
Yeah, all together. Just be careful of the cords when you come across, so.
Like a semicircle with that.
Where do you play? Where do you play or practice?
We practice at Charbonneau.
That's right. Okay, someone should have said. Sorry.
But they won and played their tournament on full-size courses.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, that's good. Yeah. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Great job. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Yeah, you do it. You're welcome to stay if you'd like.
Yes, we just have a few more hours. A few more hours. Oh, I guess they're going to.
Boring, trust me.
They're going to go practice their swing. Okay.
Well, there's still daylight.
Talk to you later. Okay. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Continuing on the mayor's business, this is the place where I report to the other councilors on some of the activities I have done since we last met. I actually had a family vacation, and I thank Council President Ockervall for running that last meeting. Really appreciate that. Many of us were at the Juneteenth celebration, the second Juneteenth celebration for Wilsonville. It was organized by the city's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and they were there. We just had a wonderful time at Town Center Park. It did not rain on us. That was amazing. And as we discussed at the event, Juneteenth is a newly designated federal and state holiday memorializing the end of slavery in the United States. And it was a wonderful and well-attended event with great activities. We had some speeches, and we had some really fun Afro-pop music by a band called Jujubu, I think was the name of it, and sampled Moroccan cuisine from a local vendor. And I wanted to thank the staff and the committee and everybody who put that together and everyone who came to it, because it was a lot of fun. We had people from all different backgrounds and had a lot of great conversations. We also had last week the first, in recent memory, Wilsonville Business Summit. It was put together by Clackamas Community College in partnership with the City of Wilsonville at the Clackamas Community College campus. We had a number of local businesses and talked about things that that people really saw as advantages in Wilsonville. We did some of that, but we mainly talked about needs that can be addressed possibly by our Clackamas Community College campus and the city to improve the economic activity in Wilsonville and make the work of our employers even more effective. And by and large, we heard that there was a lot of interest in assistance with hiring, and that's no surprise to people, but I think it's attracting and retaining employees. So we're very interested in working on that. I wanted to thank Matt Lorenz and the city's Economic Development Manager, and I know that we also had a number of other elected officials and area employers who joined us as well, and I look forward to future similar gatherings. The Chamber of Commerce was there with us as well. Also attended a meeting of the French Prairie Forum, and that is communities south of the river, including Wilsonville. Very interesting hearing about all of the economic development going on in cities including Donald, Woodburn, Canby, Wilsonville, a couple of others. Pardon?
You mentioned Woodburn?
And Woodburn, yes. St. Paul, lots of amazing activity going on, and we're seeing housing, we're seeing businesses come in, and yesterday I happened to drive past the Amazon warehouse that is going up in Woodburn, and it is huge. So those things are all good. We also reported on some of the activities here in Wilsonville, and I think one of the things that strikes me is we are going to have more housing in the area, and we're going to need to continue to make sure that the Boone Bridge serves all of this increasing activity. I attended a meeting of the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Commission this last week as well. This is our newest commission. And just briefly, we looked at some of the priorities that each of the members of the commission had identified at the last meeting. And we heard a presentation from a leader in the city of Hillsborough who is putting together their public art program, so that was really good background for the commission. We heard from City of Wilsonville staff member Brian Stevenson of the Parks and Recreation Department regarding the new way that we're going to be deploying the Community Tourism Grant Program. The commission will look at that the next time. It's, you may recall at a prior meeting we discussed how that grant program will be modified to focus more on supporting cultural events and programs. And the commission will be looking at recommendations for how to administer that. Our next city council meeting is going to be, we are not having a meeting around the July 4th holiday. We've canceled that one, so the next meeting will be Monday, July 18th at 7 p.m. The last item on this mayor's business is for us to have a discussion about the Willamette Falls Locks State Commission remaining funds. And I think, are you going to take that on?
I certainly can give you the background. There's about, of the money that we had committed early on toward that purpose, I think there's like $900 left. And so,
maybe we give a framing of what it was.
I'm sorry, the Willamette Falls Locks Commission that I believe Councilor Linville was a part of, Councilor Lehan is involved in. Basically their charter is done, and there's a new entity that's being formed, so there's about $900 of city funding that we could either ask for it back or we could allow them to use those funds for ongoing efforts. And so the recommendation is that if you want to do that, if you want to allow them to use that funding, you just need a motion and a second to allow them to use those funds.
So I can give a little more business or background on that if the council would like, but it's my, so there are $900 left that we did not expend, and I think it would be expedient to transfer that to that next commission because they have plenty of use for it.
Authority. It's called the authority.
To the Willamette Falls Locks Authority. So what I think I'd like to do is ask for a motion to allocate the remaining $900 to the Willamette Falls Locks Authority in a second, and then we can discuss it after that.
Your Honor, I'd be happy to make that motion. But I can give just a little bit of background, just so we...
Maybe on the discussion.
Motion in a second.
So let's just do the motion. So.
Okay, all right. So I would like to move to authorize the city manager to communicate to Clackamas County the city council's permission to advance the city's unspent Willamette Falls Locks Commission funds to the account of the new Willamette Falls Locks Authority.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been moved and seconded, and now we have time for discussion. If you'd like to give us some more.
Yeah, the commission, I am a commissioner, I was a commissioner on the Willamette Falls Locks Commission. We completed our transfer agreement for the Corps of Engineers to transfer the ownership of the locks to the Willamette Falls Locks Authority. Prior to that, we had an intergovernmental agreement along with other local entities, not just communities, but entities, and we allocated funds to them. And so the locks, now that there is no longer a locks commission, the funds either go back to the entities or they get transferred. And so it is about a total of about $58,000 when you add up all the entities that will go back. Our portion, as you indicated, was about $936 remaining. And probably more of an administrative duty and time and effort to take the money back than it is to authorize it, but it is very good. I think it's a very good move to send our support to the Locks Authority.
So just a clarifying question. In your motion What was the reference to Clackamas County? Were they weren't the authority, were they, for the commission?
They hold all the money for the commission.
They're the fiduciary agent.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I understand.
And they need to know what to do with the money that's in those funds.
Okay.
So, this is moving to the next phase of reopening the locks, and it's going to be a big project, and I think it is a very good idea to allocate these funds toward that direction. So,
Yeah, there is, right now, there's $6.2 million in federal funding for seismic repairs, and another 7.5 in legislative funding for other repairs. So there is money for the repairs. What there isn't money for right now is the management and oversight to get the work done.
So, seeing no further, do you have another comment? Okay. I will call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. And there is one more item for mayor's business, and that is, I'd like to ask the city manager to circle back to our discussion on the fireworks.
I really, Mayor, just put that on there as a placeholder. We discussed it at our last meeting, and I didn't really get the sense that there was a desire to go in any particular direction, just given the wetness of January that we've had. We're going to do more education on the illegal fireworks that are of major concern. But beyond that, it was put on there to see if you wanted to go in a particular direction. I didn't see any desire to do that at the last meeting, but I wanted to give you another opportunity
I
to provide
think it's
additional
important to continue to really try to maintain the gains that we made last year on not having the illegal fireworks.
Yeah, that is the priority in the messaging.
And I think it would be good to communicate with the homeowners associations as well, so they can spread that word through their own networks. It's really a peer-to-peer is one of the tools we can use here.
Okay.
Okay. That brings us to the communications section of our agenda, and this is an opportunity for visitors to address the city council on items not on the agenda. It's also a time to address items that are on the agenda but are not scheduled for a public hearing. Staff and the city council will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizens' input before tonight's meeting ends or as quickly as possible thereafter. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Use raise hand feature of Zoom to let us know if you'd like to provide comments. Do we have anyone ready to make comments? All right, that brings us to councilor comments, liaison reports, and meeting announcements, starting with Council President Akkerval.
Thank you. I just had a few things that I wanted to cover, and one of them was the mayor did a great summary of the Juneteenth event that was held this last weekend. I wanted to, with that, share an appreciation for our DEI committee and staff who really put on an excellent event, and I know that they were very involved in producing that event. So thank you to our DEI committee on that. I also wanted to cover some interaction or some feedback that I was able to gather from second graders at Lowry Primary several weeks ago now. But I believe the rest of council has been supplied with the letters that I received following a presentation that Ms. Mombert and I did for the entire second grade at Lowry Primary. And in that presentation, we covered our own city format of government. We explained the council manager format of government, and also talked about how they could give feedback and how they can be engaged in their community, and kind of how the process of change and input is given in a city such as Wilsonville, and encourage them to give some of that input and feedback. And so they wrote letters, which you've all received. There are some real gems in those letters. And so, but I know that there are many letters to review. So I will kind of give some highlights of topics that were covered in that feedback. Parks was a theme that was probably most mentioned in the letters. They have a great appreciation for parks. Popular features that were mentioned are climbing structures, slides, soccer fields, swings, trails, and there was also a request for operational drinking fountains, which I thought was quite smart, right? That we need to make sure that our drinking fountains are operating in our parks because they want to use them. For entertainment and recreation facilities, a public pool, a city pool, or water park was a very popular facility type that was mentioned. Again, it was really about the parks, pool, water play, and then later on I'll cover donut shop. But a roller skating rink or ice skating rink was also mentioned, as was opportunity to take dance classes or gymnastics, and perhaps to be able to take free dance classes and gymnastics. So looking at different types of programming and how can we make it accessible to all the youth in our community. For housing, they hit all the topics. Housing, they talked about, well, there was one surprising request for log homes that I did not anticipate, but there was also a number of students that talked about the need for free housing for people that may not have homes. And so looking at making sure that our community is able to be housed. For social connections, they commented on the importance of friendship and of looking forward to in-person meetings. We had a Zoom meeting at that point. So they talked about having those important social connections. Regarding commerce and stores, donut shop was the most mentioned type of store that they want to see in Wilsonville. And I kind of have to agree, like, it's not a bad idea. Schools, they want to see more schools. They appreciate the Lowry playground as well. They like sidewalks. For public health, there was a few comments about encouraging healthy habits and limiting smoking and vaping. For thinking about environmental concerns, there were comments about planting more trees, using less plastic. There was an interest in solar power and concerns about pollution. They like the library, and there was also interest in the mayor, or, quote, the boss. So really they covered a lot of topics. They gave some good feedback, and I want to encourage them in continuing to have that engagement because their voice is important to our community, and their view of what Wilsonville can be in our future is also very important. So a big thank you to Lowry Primary, second grade. Hope to hear more from you going on.
We'll pass that on to the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
Future counselors.
Councilor Lehan.
Yes, when I did second grade presentations, I always asked them who they thought the boss of the mayor was. And of course, always, it's the president. Then when I disavow them of that notion, then they'll go down to the governor, the boss of the mayor. And it takes a while to come around to, it's the people.
It's you.
It's the people who vote. And then it's not all of you, because how old do you have to be to vote? And most second graders know you need to be 18.
Okay.
They know they're not voters, but they will be. So then they'll be the boss of you.
Yes.
Anyway, the main thing I have done since last we met is to attend the official turnover of the commission. Were you there?
No.
You were not there. of the commission to the authority, which was last week and it took place at the falls, at the locks. It included a tour of the locks, and I will say of the locks and on around to the viewpoint of the falls from the Westland side, needs a lot of work. That 13 million or whatever is looking pretty slim.
146 years old.
Yeah, looks like it, yeah. Because it's not just the locks, it's everything else around there. The sidewalks, the guardrails, the this, that, the other thing, it needs work. So we'll see how that works out. But certainly it has the potential to be spectacular at some point in time, but it could be quite a bit of time before it was really attractive to the public to go there and watch the locks. The way they do, I used to live in Seattle, and the locks on Lake Union, or on Lake Washington into the Sound, hugely popular, beautiful place to watch all those boats, and big lawn, and people go have picnics and such. That's not what this is like. So
It's not ready for that.
it's not that level of a tourist attraction. But what is spectacular is that behind it is Willamette Falls, and it really is a spectacular sight up close if you can get that close to it. So I look forward to working on the Locks Authority and trying to get that open, because even if the locks itself is not ready for prime time for some time to come, the fact that we can move boat traffic up and down the river, from the lower river to the upper river and vice versa, means that we have a lot more potential for everything from, steamboat dinner cruise kinds of things to canoes and kayaks and et cetera. So that will open a lot more tourist possibilities for the whole Newburgh pool, certainly to Newburgh and even to Salem. So look forward to that in the future. Not right away, though.
Thank you.
Take a while. Okay, go.
Councillor West.
This was my first Juneteenth celebration. We weren't able to go last year, and we were so happy that it wasn't going to rain on us for a second. It waited till we were done, so thank you for that. I went, Paul, myself, Jay, had a blast. The food was fantastic. Those monk cookies were on point, and the band was popping and good, and we had a good time. I got to meet the members of the Black Student Union. Jay talks about them when he comes home and has his little button, but I had never met them or face to face. One of his school counselors was there, Mr. Abrams, fantastic guy. I interacted with. The sheriff's office was there. Their elected officials came by. It was great. It was nice. We had a good time. And then before we knew it, it was over. But we had a good time, so I look forward to next year's. And that's about all I have this week, is I'm getting a chance to attend that.
All right, thank you. Councillor Linville.
Is that on?
There. Outside of the celebration, which I'll make a comment about, the Juneteenth, I was really delighted that our community, and I think the Portland community kind of stepped it up too. They had a larger celebration this year than they ever have had, and so I think for us to have what we had was great. I did want to just, I was looking at some quotes, and Harriet Tubman, she is the woman who ran the Underground Railroad who some people believe was an actual train. She made a statement that said, "I'd crossed the line, I was free, but there was no one to welcome me to the land of freedom. I was a stranger in a strange land." And I think it just brought to my mind that we're, to some degree, we're still in that same place where we have a segment of our population who feel that they are strangers in a strange land. And I think in our area, particularly with the history of African Americans in the state of Oregon and in the Portland metropolitan area in particular, we still have a lot of work to do. And so I am really delighted that that we're taking the steps that we are taking. I think we've got a lot of work to do to really have all of our citizens feel safe and welcomed in our community, and that just takes all of us. But the comments that I heard on the news from the folks from the Portland area was they were excited because it was a celebration of freedom for everyone. And I thought that was really a good way to characterize it. So I attended the C4 Metro Subcommittee, and while we did had a lot of discussion about regional transportation plans and projects, the one item that I wanted to bring to the attention of the council is that for the first time in the state of Oregon, a community is asking for a mid-cycle approval of expansion of the urban growth boundary, and that's Tigard. And what Tigard wants to do is they have a development, and they're pretty much, I don't want to say they're shovel ready, but they have a project that they want, that they're pretty close to building. And so the concept is that they are asking Metro to do an exchange of property lands that are currently within the urban growth boundary but in other communities, and exchange an equal amount of that land for the land that they want to expand. So in other words, they would reduce the urban growth boundary in some areas and then expand it in the Tigard area. And I asked a couple of questions. I got a little concerned over one of the answers that I got because I was asking, well, what will happen? They're going to do outreach, and they're going to look at properties that have been, where the urban growth boundary has been expanded, but no development has happened. And they are going to make decisions about whether that property should be exchanged. And my question was, well, what if you did not get agreement from that community that they wanted to give up that land within their urban growth boundary? And the answer I got was, well, I'm sure as a counselor you've made decisions that have not made everyone happy. And that concerned me because that to me sounded like less like it was going to be a collaborative process and more like an administrative process. This has never been done in the state of Oregon, and if it's done now, while I recognize that Tigard is in need and they're ready to go, I just thought about communities that are hoping at some point to use that for housing that they need for their community, and then it might be taken away from them just because they haven't, just because they're not first in line. And so, I verbalized my concern about that during our discussion. This is going to go to Metro, what they are proposing right now is to remove some of the urban growth boundary lands from the Damascus area, and reassign it to Tigard using urban reserves land, which is those areas designated for future urban growth. So, I just thought y'all ought to know that that's something that Metro is going to be considering here shortly. I would imagine it went to C4.
It did. We had a preview of it. And there will be more to learn at the Metro meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's it.
All right. Thank you, councilors. That brings us to our consent agenda. And will the city attorney please read the consent agenda?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 2983, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute a second amendment to the professional services agreement with Murray Smith, Inc. to provide construction inspection services for the Corral Creek and River Green Lift Stations Rehabilitation Project, Capital Improvement Project 2105. Resolution number 2984, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment to the professional services contract with Moore, oh man, I'm going to butcher this, but it's the MIG Inc. for Frog Pond East and South Master Planning. Minutes of the June 6, 2022 City Council meeting. Should have gotten clarification on how to pronounce that before I just read it.
That's okay. So that having heard the consent agenda.
Excuse me, did you say the minutes?
Yep.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry.
Do I have a motion?
Your Honor, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
I'll second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. That brings us to, I believe, our next stop is any city manager business?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Okay. Legal business.
Thank you, Mayor. A few things for legal business tonight. First, on the Aurora Airport, tonight for council's consideration is whether to authorize the city attorney to voluntarily dismiss Marion County Circuit Court case number 19 CV 54498 against the Oregon Department of Aviation and the Oregon Aviation Board. If so, I will need a motion to that effect.
Council President Ockervall, would you like to make a motion to that effect, please? You're welcome.
May I refer back to, I move to make a motion to the effect of the information immediately shared by our city attorney.
I'll second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mayor. And the second and third items for council's consideration are in regard to the city's public contracting code. These items involve some needed clarity and efficiency with regard to smaller dollar amount public contracts. The second item concerns amendments to contracts that are less than $100,000. The city's public contracting code has two implicitly conflicting provisions. It states the city manager has the authority to sign contracts with a value of $100,000 or less without council approval. However, another provision in the code states that any contract amendment of more than 15% of the original contract amount must be approved by council, with no consideration if the new total contract amount is still under the city manager's $100,000 signing authority. In essence, this implicit conflict means that if a contract was originally $25,000 and needs a $5,000 amendment, there could be an interpretation that that $5,000 amendment would need to come to council for approval. For efficiency and based on the city manager's inherent $100,000 signing authority, for council's consideration is whether to authorize the city manager to sign contract amendments where the total amount, including amendments, is within the city manager's contract signing authority. If the council is supportive of that, I'll need a motion to that effect.
May I have a motion to that effect, Council President Ockervall?
Wow.
Can I say so moved? Yes. There you go.
Second?
I'll second.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I think that was a clear explanation. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, the third item for council's consideration is also regarding to the city's public contracting code. The city's public contracting code is open to interpretation regarding the authority to extend the term of a contract. The code states that the city manager may extend a contract for a single term not to exceed the initial term. Read most narrowly, this provision would prohibit extending a contract for a term longer than the initial term. Read more broadly, it could be interpreted to allow each extension to not be longer than the initial term. The contracts particularly impacted by this provision are the city's small on-call services contracts, which may initially be for only 1 year, but the contract amount has not been spent over that year or even over a second year. So again, for efficiency, and since the city manager has expressed limits to the contract amount that may be approved without council review, for the council's consideration is whether to authorize the city manager to sign extension of contract terms so long as such contracts, including any amendments, are still within the city manager's signing authority of $100,000. If the council is supportive of such authorization, I will need a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you for that. And just to note, these items have been flagged as part of our public contracting code review project that we are doing. So the idea is to fully address these types of issues that have popped up from time to time when we do a code revision. So staff really appreciates this action by the council tonight. And one final thing, since we do not have our council meeting for July 7th, that I will be on vacation from July 4th for those 2 weeks, so through July 15th.
Thank you. So that concludes our legal business, and in fact, that brings us to the conclusion of this meeting. I'm going to adjourn the meeting of the City Council, and I want to let you know that we will have an urban renewal agency immediately following, and we will even have another meeting after that, an executive session. So the City Council meeting is hereby adjourned, 8:20 p.m. I'm going to go right into call to order a meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency. Will the agency recorder please call the roll?
Member Linville? Here. Member West?
Here.
Member Ockervall? Here. Member Lehan?
Here.
Chair Fitzgerald?
Here. May I have a motion to approve the following order of agenda?
Your Honor, I move to approve the following order agenda.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. That brings us to citizen input, and this is an opportunity for visitors to address the Urban Renewal Agency on items not on the agenda. It is also time to address items that are on the agenda but are not scheduled for a public hearing. Staff and the Urban Renewal Agency will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizens input before tonight's meeting ends or as quickly as possible thereafter. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Use the raise hand feature of Zoom to let us know you would like to provide comments. Do we have anyone wishing to provide comments? All right, that brings us to the consent agenda. Will the agency attorney please read it?
URA Resolution 326, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville Urban Renewal Agency authorizing the execution of a lease agreement with Wilsonville Community Sharing for the use of space in the Art Tech building, and minutes of the June 6, 2022 Urban Renewal Agency meeting.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
I'll second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Seeing no business, further business,
Maybe one plug for the Laser Light Show, July 4th, 9 p.m.
Excuse me.
Town Center Park, sorry.
Not on urban renewal.
No, but I wanted to make sure that I got it out there while we're still on TV.
Okay. Sorry.
All good.
Everyone who's interested, all of these members, there will be a laser light show July 4th. Urban Renewal Agency meeting is adjourned at 8:22 p.m. And I will now call to order a meeting of the executive session.